The locks clicked at exactly 11:47 p.m. I know the time because I'd been staring at my phone for the last 20 minutes, watching the Uber app like it was going to tell me something different than what I already knew, that my flight to Phoenix was boarding in 43 minutes, and this driver was taking surface streets instead of the 405, and I was going to miss it. I had my carry-on wedged between my knees, my laptop bag on the seat beside me, and a boarding pass for seat 24C that was about to become worthless. That was the only thing I was worried about. Then I heard it. That sound. 4 door locks dropping simultaneously. Thunk, 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 thunk. Like a coffin being sealed. And the driver, this guy named Marcus, whose rating was 4.91 stars, and who hadn't said more than 6 words to me since I got in the car, suddenly reached over and killed his headlights. We were sitting at the curb outside Terminal 3 of LAX, engines roaring overhead every 45 seconds, the whole airport glowing orange and white around us. And this man had just locked us inside a dark car and turned off the lights. "Don't get out," he said. His voice was completely flat, not threatening, not aggressive, just flat, like someone reading from a script they'd memorized under extreme pressure. "Don't get out, trust me. You'll understand in a minute." I looked at him. He was maybe 55, heavy-set, with a gray beard and one of those LA Dodgers caps that's been washed so many times the brim has gone soft. His hands were on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, gripping it so hard his knuckles were pale under the terminal lights coming through the windshield. He was staring straight ahead at something I couldn't see yet. "Sir," I said slowly, "what is going on?" "Just wait," he said. "Please, I'm begging you. Just wait 60 seconds. That word, begging, that's what got me. Not the locked doors, not the lights. The word begging, coming from a man who looked like he hadn't begged for anything in 30 years. I didn't get out. 53 seconds later, 3 LAPD cruisers came screaming around the terminal curve, lights blazing, and boxed us in on all 3 sides. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without the 2 weeks that came before it, and the 2 weeks before that don't make sense without understanding who I was when all of this started, which is to say, someone who thought she had everything figured out. Someone who had worked very, very hard to get to a place where nothing unexpected could happen to her anymore. My name is Ashley Reeves. I'm 34 years old. I lived at the time, in a 2-bedroom apartment in Glendale, California, which is one of those Los Angeles-adjacent cities that people who actually live in Los Angeles refuse to acknowledge exists. It's fine. The rent was $2,100 a month, which by California standards is practically charitable. I had a parking spot that was covered. I had a gym in the building that actually had working equipment. I had a neighbor named Mrs. Kowalski on the 3rd floor who left homemade pierogi outside my door every Christmas Eve without fail. And I had a view of the Verdugo Mountains from my kitchen window if I stood at the right angle and craned my neck. I was a logistics coordinator for a mid-sized freight company called Pacific Basin Shipping Solutions. Not glamorous, I know, but I was good at it. Really good. My job was essentially making sure that containers of goods got from point A to point B without becoming point C's problem, and I had a brain that was wired for exactly that kind of puzzle. Tracking numbers, customs codes, carrier schedules, it was like Tetris, except the blocks weighed 40,000 pounds, and if you dropped one, someone in Ohio didn't get their industrial parts on time, and you got a very unpleasant phone call from a man named Gary. I'd been at Pacific Basin for 6 years. I made $71,000 a year, plus a small performance bonus that usually brought it up to around $76,000 or $77,000. I had a 401k that I actually contributed to, 15%, which my coworker Diane said made me aggressively responsible, and a credit score of 748 that I checked on Credit Karma approximately once a week like it was a plant I needed to water. I had $14,200 in a savings account. I had no debt except the last 8 months on my car loan, which was a 2019 Honda Civic that I'd bought used with a down payment I'd saved up myself. I tell you all of this not to brag, but because I want you to understand what I was protecting. Because people who've worked that hard to build something stable, to get from nothing to something solid and real and theirs, those people carry a specific kind of terror underneath everything. The terror that it can all disappear. That you can do everything right and still lose it. I'd grown up watching my mom lose it. Twice. Once when my dad left when I was 9, and once when the restaurant she'd put her whole life into went under when I was 22. Both times the bottom dropped out without warning. Both times the thing she'd trusted most turned out to be the thing that destroyed her. I had watched her cry at the kitchen table over bills she couldn't pay, and I had made myself a promise, standing in that kitchen at 9 years old, that I would never, ever be in that position. So I built walls. Careful, methodical, expensive walls. A budget, an emergency fund, a 5-year plan that I updated every January in a Google Doc I called the Blueprint. I didn't make impulsive decisions. I didn't trust easily. I didn't let people in unless I'd watched them long enough to know they were worth it. Which brings me to Brandon. Brandon Cole had been my boyfriend for 2 years and 3 months when all of this happened. We'd met at a work conference in San Diego. He was in supply chain for a medical device company, which meant we spoke approximately the same language of logistics and spreadsheets and the quiet satisfaction of a process that runs exactly the way it's supposed to. He was 37, divorced, no kids, originally from Phoenix, which is why I was on my way to the airport that night. His younger sister Jennifer was getting married the following Saturday, and I'd been invited. I'd bought a dress. I had a speech prepared for the rehearsal dinner that I'd workshopped with my best friend Linda for 2 evenings over FaceTime. Brandon is a good-looking man. Not in a flashy way, in that dependable, broad-shouldered, steady eye contact way that makes you feel like the world is slightly more organized just because he's standing in it. He drove a clean truck. He kept his apartment tidy. He remembered things, your coffee order, the name of your dentist, the anniversary of your mother's restaurant closing, which you'd mentioned once in passing 8 months ago, and somehow he'd filed away and never forgotten. You're the first person I've dated since my divorce who actually makes me want to plan things, he told me once, 3 months in, on a Tuesday night when we were cooking pasta in his kitchen, and the whole world felt like it was exactly the right temperature. Like, with you, I actually want to think about next year, next 5 years. I told him that was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to me, and I meant it completely, because coming from someone with my history, planning next year with another person in the picture was not a small thing. It was everything. We'd talked about moving in together. We'd looked at a few places. Not seriously, just the kind of Zillow browsing that feels like a test run for wanting something real. There was a 2-bedroom in Silver Lake with exposed brick and a second bathroom and a monthly HOA fee of $340 that we'd spent an entire Saturday morning convincing ourselves we could justify. We couldn't. Not yet. But we bookmarked it anyway. Linda, who had known me since college and therefore had a front row seat to my entire romantic history, which was not a highlight reel, told me over Thanksgiving dinner that she had never seen me this relaxed. "You're not waiting for it to fall apart," she said, refilling my wine. "That's new. That's really, really new for you." She was right. For the first time in my adult life, I was not waiting for the other shoe to drop. I should have been. 3 days before I was supposed to fly to Phoenix for Jennifer's wedding, Brandon called me at 6:15 in the evening while I was sitting in traffic on the 134, eating a granola bar for dinner because I'd worked through lunch. He sounded normal. He asked how my day was. He said he was looking forward to seeing me. He said Jennifer was nervous about the flowers. Apparently the florist had called with some kind of issue. He didn't know the details. Everything was normal. I had no reason to think anything was wrong. But when I pulled into my parking spot 40 minutes later and checked my email before going inside, there was a message sitting in my inbox. No subject line. Sender address I didn't recognize. A string of random numbers and letters at a Gmail account. Inside was a single image attachment. My hands were still holding the granola bar wrapper. I remember that detail specifically, the crinkling sound it made as my fingers tightened. I opened the attachment, and the wall I had spent 25 years building developed its first crack. The photo was of Brandon. Brandon and a woman I had never seen before. They were standing outside what looked like a restaurant, somewhere warm, somewhere with string lights on a patio and palm trees in the background. He had his arm around her waist. Not a friendly arm, not a side hug arm. The kind of arm that means something, the kind that says mine without using words. She was laughing at something, her head tipped back, dark hair, maybe late 20s, and Brandon was looking at her the way he used to look at me during that first month, before we settled into the comfortable version of being together, which I had told myself was better anyway, more real, more sustainable. The timestamp in the corner of the photo said October 14th. That was 11 days ago. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 22 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on my dashboard go from 7:03 to 7:25, and I didn't move once. The granola bar wrapper was still in my hand. The engine was still running. A car tried to get my spot around 7:15 and sat behind me with its blinker on for 2 full minutes before giving up and leaving. I opened my phone and called Brandon. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, you made it home okay?" "Who is she?" I said. A pause. Not a long one, maybe 2 seconds. But in 2 seconds, I heard everything I needed to hear. Because Brandon Cole was a man who handled surprises well. He was smooth. That was one of the things I'd always appreciated about him. He didn't rattle easily. But in those 2 seconds, he rattled. "Ashley, the photo, the email, October 14th. I heard my own voice like it was coming from somewhere outside my body. Flat, controlled. The voice I used on calls with difficult vendors. "Who is she?" Another pause. Then, "Where did you get that?" "That's not an answer, Brandon." "No, I know. Ashley, I need you to listen to me. That's not what it looks like. She's a colleague from the San Diego office. There was a team dinner, and someone took photos, and it was nothing. It was literally a work event. I don't know who sent you that or why, but you have your arm around her waist. I do that with everyone. You know how You do not do that with everyone." My hand had found the steering wheel, and I was holding it now the same way Marcus would hold his steering wheel 11 days later, at 10:02, knuckles pale. "Brandon, stop. Just stop. Tell me the truth." The silence this time was longer. "I don't want to do this over the phone," he finally said. "That's also not an answer." "I know." His voice had changed, gone softer, which was worse somehow than if he'd gotten defensive. Softness meant he was preparing for something. Softness meant he already knew what he was about to say. "I know it's not. Can you come over? Or let me come to you? I want to see you when we talk about this." I thought about the dress for Jennifer's wedding hanging in my closet, the rehearsal dinner speech saved in my notes app, the non-refundable flight I'd booked 6 weeks ago. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said. He lived in a 1-bedroom in Burbank, cleaner than my place, better furniture, that truck I mentioned parked in the assigned spot out front. I had a key. I did not use the key. I knocked. He answered in 30 seconds, which meant he'd been standing near the door waiting. He was still in his work clothes, the sleeves of his button-down rolled up to the elbows, and he looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before. Not the tired of a long day, but the tired of carrying something for a while. I walked past him into the apartment without saying anything and sat down on the couch. He sat across from me in the chair, not next to me on the couch. That told me something too. "Her name is Cassandra," he said. "She goes by Cassie. She works in the San Diego office." That part was true. "How long?" He looked at the floor. 7 months. 7 months. I did the math in my head, the same way I'd do it with a shipping manifest. Automatic and precise. 7 months ago was March. March was 2 weeks after Valentine's Day, which we'd spent at a bed and breakfast in Santa Barbara that he'd booked as a surprise. March was 1 month after I'd told Linda I wasn't waiting for things to fall apart anymore. "So the whole time I've known you," I said. "No, we'd been together it wasn't the whole time. It was more than half the time." He didn't argue with that. Is this?" I stopped, reorganized. "Are you in love with her?" He looked up, and I saw it before he said it. That specific quality of pain in someone's face when the truth they're about to tell is going to hurt another person, and they know it, and they can't stop it. "I don't know," he said. "I think I might be." "I'm sorry, Ashley. I'm so sorry. I didn't plan for any of this to—" "Stop." I held up my hand. "Don't tell me you didn't plan it. You planned Jennifer's wedding. You planned the Santa Barbara trip. You planned everything. Don't tell me this was an accident that lasted 7 months." He pressed his lips together, nodded once. "Were you ever going to tell me?" I asked. "I was going to, after the wedding. I didn't want to ruin Jennifer's after the wedding." I repeated it the way you repeat something when you're trying to make sure you've heard correctly. "You were going to bring me to your sister's wedding as your girlfriend, let me give a speech at the rehearsal dinner, and then come home and break up with me." "I know how that sounds." "How does it sound, Brandon? Tell me how it sounds to you, because I want to understand." "It sounds terrible," he said quietly. "It sounds terrible, and I don't have a good reason for it, except that I was a coward. I am a coward. I kept thinking there would be a better time, and there wasn't, and I'm sorry." I stood up. I picked up my purse. My hands were steady, which surprised me. "I already have a non-refundable plane ticket," I said. He blinked. "What?" "To Phoenix, for Jennifer's wedding. $340, booked 6 weeks ago. I'm just thinking out loud." I looked at him. "I'd like my key back." He got it from the kitchen counter, set it in my palm. His fingers brushed mine, and I moved my hand away before they could linger. I drove home. I did not cry. I was saving it, I think, the way you save a document before you close it, just making sure it was recorded somewhere, stored properly, before I shut the whole thing down. I called Linda from my couch at 9:30 that night. 7 months, she said when I finished. 7 months. "Okay," I heard her exhale. "Okay. Ashley, I need to ask you something, and I need you to not get mad at me." "I'm not going to get mad at you." "Did anything feel off? Like, in hindsight, were there signs?" And here's the thing about that question, the thing I turned over in my head for the next 3 days. I didn't know. I genuinely didn't know. I'm a person who pays attention. I track patterns. I notice discrepancies. It's literally my job. And I had not seen it coming, which meant either that Brandon was an exceptionally good liar, or that I had been so committed to the idea of not waiting for things to fall apart that I had stopped watching for the ways they could. Both possibilities were awful in different ways. "I don't know," I told Linda. "Are you still going to the wedding?" "No," I said. "Obviously I'm not going to the wedding. Except, the next morning I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. Phoenix area code. I almost didn't answer. "Is this Ashley Reeves?" The voice was young, a little breathless, with the particular tension of someone who has rehearsed what they're about to say. "Yes," I said slowly. "Hi, this is Jennifer, Brandon's sister." A pause. "I know this is really weird. I got your number from Brandon's phone because he told me last night what happened, and I needed to call you. I'm so sorry. I've known about Cassie since April, and I told him he had to tell you. I told him so many times, and he just kept saying he would, and then he wouldn't, and I should have called you myself months ago, and I didn't, and I'm sorry." I sat very still on my couch. "Jennifer," I said carefully, "why are you calling me?" Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "Because I think you should still come to the wedding," she said. "Not for him, not because anything is okay, but because there's something you need to know. Something about Brandon that I found out last week that's worse than Cassie, and I don't think you should find out about it from anyone but me." The granola bar wrapper was still on my coffee table. I'd never thrown it away. My flight was in 14 hours. I sat on my couch for a long time after Jennifer hung up. The apartment was quiet in that specific way it gets after 11 p.m. in Glendale. No traffic on the street below, no footsteps from the unit upstairs, just the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional distant sound of a siren heading somewhere that wasn't here. The granola bar wrapper was still on the coffee table. I hadn't eaten anything since that granola bar in the car. I wasn't hungry. My body had decided that food was a problem for a different person living a different life. Something worse than Cassie. I turned those 4 words over and over in my head like a rock in a tumbler, trying to wear them down into something smooth and comprehensible. What could be worse than 7 months? What could be worse than being brought to a wedding under false pretenses? What could be worse than finding out from an anonymous email in a parking garage holding a granola bar wrapper that the person you'd allowed yourself to trust, really trust, for the first time in years, had been lying to you since March? I picked up my phone and called Linda. She answered on the first ring, which meant she hadn't been sleeping either. Jennifer called me, I said. A pause. Brandon's sister, Jennifer? She says there's something worse than Cassie. She wants me to come to Phoenix to tell me in person. Another pause. Longer. I heard Linda move, the sound of blankets, of someone sitting up in bed. Ashley, listen to me. Don't go. I already have the ticket. You can eat the ticket. $340 is not worth walking into whatever this is. She sounded genuinely scared for me, I said. Not dramatic, scared. Or she's dramatic and you can't tell the difference right now because you've been blindsided and your judgment is, honey, your judgment is not at full capacity tonight. That's not an insult. That's just biology. I knew she was right about the judgment part. I knew it the way you know your brakes are soft. Not enough to stop the car, but enough to register the feeling, the slight delay between intention and action. My processing was off. Things that should have computed quickly were taking longer. What if it's legal, I said. What if it's something that affects me, like financially or, I don't know, Linda. What if there's something I need to know to protect myself? Silence. What kind of something? She finally said. I don't know. That's the problem. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed from midnight to 5:30 a.m. and watched the ceiling and thought about Brandon rolling his dress shirts and packing them into a neat suitcase for the Santa Barbara trip, and thought about the way he'd said, I want to think about next year, next 5 years, and thought about March, and thought about Cassie with her head tipped back laughing under string lights, and thought about what Jennifer's voice had sounded like. That particular quality of urgency that doesn't perform well, that can't be faked without considerable practice. At 5:30, I got up. I made coffee. I sat at my kitchen window at the angle where you can see the Verdugo Mountains, and I watched them go from black to gray to the kind of pale purple gold they turn right before actual sunrise. And I made a decision. I was going to Phoenix. Not for Brandon, not even for Jennifer. I was going because I had spent my entire adult life building a careful, methodical, protected life. And some anonymous person had sent me an email that cracked it open. And now Brandon's sister was telling me the crack went deeper than I'd seen. And I was categorically not the kind of person who waited in the parking garage while the ground shifted under her. I was the person who got out of the car and walked toward the thing she was afraid of. That was the decision. It felt at the time like strength. I didn't know yet that I was walking directly into the worst 48 hours of my adult life. The flight to Phoenix was 2 hours and 12 minutes. I sat in seat 24C with my laptop bag under the seat in front of me and my carry-on in the overhead bin. And I did not open my laptop, and I did not watch the in-flight entertainment, and I did not think about Brandon any more than I could help. What I did instead was write a list in my notes app titled Questions, the same app where I'd saved the rehearsal dinner speech that I deleted at 5:47 a.m. before I left for the airport. The list had 6 items on it. who sent the email, why October 14th, what Jennifer knows that I don't, what worse than Cassie means, whether I need a lawyer, whether any of this is going to affect my $14,200. That last one sounds mercenary. I know how it sounds. But I'd watched my mother lose everything twice, and the second time, the thing that had broken her wasn't the grief. It was the financial aftermath of the grief. The bills that kept arriving after the restaurant was gone. The loans she'd signed in good faith. The credit cards she hadn't known were maxed. The grief you can survive. It's the practical wreckage that buries you. So yes, I was thinking about my $14,200. I make no apologies for that. Jennifer picked me up from Phoenix Sky Harbor in a silver Toyota Corolla with a cracked bumper sticker that said something about hiking the Appalachian Trail. She was shorter than I'd expected from Brandon's descriptions. He always talked about her like she was larger than life, his scrappy younger sister who ran half marathons and argued with their mother about politics at Christmas dinner. In person, she was maybe 5'3", with Brandon's same dark eyes and a braid that was coming loose on one side, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt despite the Arizona heat. She looked like she hadn't slept either. She hugged me in the arrivals lane, which I hadn't expected. Tight, genuine, the hug of someone who's been carrying guilt. "I'm so glad you came," she said into my shoulder. "I'm so sorry for everything." We didn't talk in the car, not about Brandon, not about why I was there. She drove us to a diner called Rosie's on the east side of Scottsdale, one of those places with vinyl booths and laminated menus and coffee that comes in a glass pot and never quite gets hot enough. We slid into a corner booth. A waitress named Karen, her name tag, I noticed it automatically, brought us coffee without being asked. Jennifer wrapped both hands around her mug and looked at me. "I need to start from the beginning," she said. "And I need you to let me get through the whole thing before you ask questions, because if you stop me in the middle, I'm going to lose my nerve." "Okay," I said. "Brandon was married before. You know that. He told me, 3 years ago. Amicable divorce, no kids." Jennifer's jaw tightened. Just slightly. The way someone's jaw tightens when they're hearing something incorrect and deciding how to correct it. "Okay, so the divorce part is true. The amicable part is not. And the no kids part is—" She stopped, took a breath. "Her name is Melissa, his ex-wife. They were together for 6 years, married for 3. The divorce was not amicable. There was a restraining order." The coffee was too hot, but I drank some anyway, just to have something to do with my hands. "He told me it was mutual," I said. "He tells everyone that." Jennifer's voice was quiet and controlled, the voice of someone who has had this conversation before in their head many times. "Melissa had a restraining order against him for 14 months. It expired 18 months ago. I have the case number if you want it. It's public record." The diner hummed around us. Someone at the counter was talking about the Cardinals. The coffee pot gurgled on its warmer. "What was the order for?" I said. It wasn't quite a question. It came out flat, the way Marcus would say, "Don't get out 11 days later," the voice you use when you already know the answer is going to be bad and you're just waiting for it to arrive. Jennifer looked at her hands. Harassment, showing up at her workplace, accessing her email without permission. She said he'd installed something on her phone, some kind of tracking app, and she didn't know about it for almost 8 months. When she found out, she went to the police. She paused. She also said there were things before the tracking app, small things at first. He'd know things he shouldn't know, things she'd talked about with her friends, conversations he wasn't present for. She thought she was losing her mind for a while, thought she was misremembering what she'd told him. I set my coffee cup down. The vinyl booth was cold against my back. The Cardinals' conversation at the counter continued. Karen, the waitress, was refilling someone's orange juice. "Jennifer," I said slowly, "my phone." She looked up. "I've had the same phone for 2 years. Brandon has been in my apartment. He's used my charger." I was thinking out loud now, the same automatic processing I'd use on a freight manifest, but my hands had started to shake. "He knows my passcode. He set up my Bluetooth speaker because I couldn't figure out the app. He's been alone in my apartment at least 30 times. Jennifer reached across the table and covered my shaking hands with hers. That's why I called you, she said. That's why I needed you to come in person. Because I didn't know how to say this over the phone without, she paused, without you understanding that I mean it, that this isn't me being dramatic. Ashley, I think you need to check your phone. I think you need to check it today. And I think you need to not go back to your apartment alone until you do. The fluorescent light above our booth buzzed once. I looked at my phone sitting face up on the table beside my coffee cup. My phone, which I carried everywhere, which I'd used to tell Linda I wasn't waiting for things to fall apart anymore, which I'd used to call my mother every Sunday, which had my banking app, my location services, my calendar showing exactly where I was going to be and when. I turned it face down. And then, because my hands were still shaking, and because I am my mother's daughter and my mother always said that when you don't know what to do next, you eat something, I picked up the laminated menu and I said, I need to order breakfast first. And then you're going to tell me everything else, all of it. And then we're going to figure out what to do. Jennifer looked at me for a moment. Then, very slowly, she nodded. There's more, she said. About Cassie, about why he introduced her to our parents last month. Last month, I repeated it, at Thanksgiving dinner. Her voice dropped. He brought her to Thanksgiving, Ashley, while I think you were in Sacramento for work that week. Sacramento, November 8th through the 11th, a carrier audit that had taken me 4 days and generated approximately 300 emails. I had called Brandon from my hotel room every night. He had asked how it was going. He had said he missed me. He had been, apparently, introducing a woman named Cassie to his entire family at his parents' table in Phoenix, while I ate room service in a Hampton Inn and told him I'd be home Thursday. Karen came back with her coffee pot. I turned my cup over and let her fill it. Tell me everything, I said. Jennifer talked for 2 hours. She talked through 3 refills of coffee and a plate of toast that neither of us touched, and 1 interruption from Karen asking if we needed anything else, to which I said no thank you without looking up. She talked about Melissa first, about the tracking app, about the police report, about the 14 months of the restraining order, and how Brandon had told the entire family that Melissa was unstable, that she'd fabricated everything, that the restraining order was the legal system being weaponized by a vindictive woman who couldn't accept that a marriage had simply run its course. And the family had believed him because Brandon was steady and calm and reasonable, and Melissa, by the time everything was done, had stopped showing up to defend herself. She moved to Seattle, Jennifer said, about a year after the order expired. I found her on LinkedIn 6 months ago. I wanted to reach out. I didn't know what to say. Did Brandon know you found her? No. She turned her coffee cup in a slow circle on the table. But that's what started it. I was looking at Melissa's profile, and I started thinking about things. Patterns. The way he always knew things. The way he'd casually mention something you'd talked about with someone else, and when you asked how he knew, he'd say he must have heard it in passing, or you must have told him and forgotten. She looked up. Did he ever do that with you? I thought about it. Thought about Brandon knowing the anniversary of my mother's restaurant closing, which I'd mentioned once. Thought about him asking about a work call I'd had with my supervisor, Diane, referencing details I didn't remember sharing with him. Thought about the way he'd sometimes text me right as I was about to text him, the timing so precise it had seemed romantic at the time, the kind of thing you tell your friends about as evidence that someone really knows you. Yes, I said. Jennifer nodded like she'd been expecting that. After I found Melissa, I started paying attention differently at Thanksgiving. Cassie was there, and I watched how he was with her. And there was a moment. She went to the bathroom, and I saw him pick up her phone from the table. He was on it for maybe 90 seconds. She came back, and he set it down, and she never noticed. Jennifer's voice went very quiet. I know what I saw, Ashley. I know it. He was installing something, I said. That's what I think. I sat with that for a moment. The diner hummed. Outside, the Arizona sun was turning the parking lot into a flat white mirror. Jennifer, I said. The anonymous email. The photo of Brandon and Cassie. Do you know who sent it? She looked at her hands. That was me. I didn't say anything. I made a dummy account, she said. I'd taken the photo at Thanksgiving on my phone. I didn't know how to call you. I didn't know what to say. I kept thinking Brandon would figure it out, and then what? I was scared of him, Ashley, my own brother. I'm scared of him. Her voice cracked on that last sentence just slightly, and she pressed her lips together and got it back under control. I'm sorry I didn't do it sooner. I'm sorry I didn't do more. I reached across the table and covered her hands the way she'd covered mine earlier. You called me, I said. You're here. That's enough. We drove from Rosie's Diner to a Verizon store on Scottsdale Road. I went in alone. I told the technician, a kid named Michael who couldn't have been more than 22, that I thought I might have unwanted software on my phone and I needed it checked. He looked at me with the specific expression of someone who has heard this before and knows what it usually means, and he said he could run a diagnostic. It took 19 minutes. He came back to the counter and set my phone down between us and said, There's a third-party application running in the background that I don't recognize. It's not showing on your app list. It's embedded. It's been active for, he checked his screen, approximately 8 months. 8 months. 1 month after Brandon and I had started dating. Can you remove it? I said. I can do a factory reset. That'll get everything, but you'll lose. Do it, I said. While Michael did the reset, I borrowed Jennifer's phone and called Linda. Ashley, she said immediately. Where are you? Are you okay? I'm in Scottsdale. I'm with Jennifer. I stepped outside the Verizon store into the white Arizona heat. Linda, he had something on my phone, a tracking app. It's been there for 8 months. The silence on the other end lasted 4 full seconds. Okay, Linda said, and her voice had shifted into the particular register it gets when she's moving from emotion directly into problem-solving mode, which is one of the reasons I have kept her as my best friend for 12 years. Okay, here's what you're going to do. You're not going back to that apartment alone. Do you have a number for his ex-wife? Melissa? If she filed a police report, there's a case number. Jennifer said it's public record. You get that case number, and you get yourself to a police station in LA when you get back, and you report this. Today, not next week, today. I have a return flight tonight, I said. Good, take it. And Ashley, before you get on that plane, I need you to know something. Her voice dropped slightly. I went to your building this morning. I know you gave me a spare key for emergencies. I went and I knocked on Brandon's door. I know, but I needed to see Linda. He wasn't there. His truck wasn't in the lot. But Mrs. Kowalski from the 3rd floor was coming in when I was leaving, and she told me she'd seen a man she didn't recognize in the parking garage yesterday evening, near your car. She described him. Ashley, it wasn't Brandon. I leaned against the exterior wall of the Verizon store. The concrete was hot against my back. What do you mean it wasn't Brandon? She said he was younger, heavy-set, gray beard. She didn't recognize him, and it made her uncomfortable enough that she mentioned it to the building manager this morning. I stood very still. Heavy-set, gray beard, Marcus. I called the non-emergency LAPD line from the Verizon store parking lot, still on Jennifer's phone, and told them I believed I'd had a stalkerware application installed on my phone by someone I'd been in a relationship with, that there was a prior restraining order against this person from an ex-wife named Melissa, and that an unidentified man had been seen near my vehicle in my residential parking garage the previous evening. The officer who took the report gave me a case number and told me to come into the West Hollywood station when I was back in LA. Then I called the Uber app on Jennifer's freshly reset phone, she'd downloaded it for me, and I booked a ride back to Phoenix Sky Harbor. My driver was named Marcus. I know how that sounds, but that's what the app said, Marcus, 4.91 stars, 7 minutes away. And when the black Toyota Camry pulled up and the window came down and I saw the gray beard and the Dodgers cap, I stood completely still for 3 seconds before I got in the car. He didn't say anything for the first 10 minutes. I sat in the back seat with Jennifer's number in my pocket and my factory reset phone in my hand, and I watched the Arizona desert slide past the windows, and I thought about the 8 months and Melissa in Seattle and the Thanksgiving table and Cassie's head tipped back laughing and the granola bar wrapper on my coffee table. "You okay back there?" Marcus said at a red light on Scottsdale Road. "No," I said honestly. He nodded, like that was a reasonable answer. "You need to talk, or you need quiet?" "Quiet," I said, "for now." He nodded again and drove. We were 15 minutes from the airport when he spoke again. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to not panic." His voice was calm, that flat, careful calm. "I work with a man named Derek who does private security. He called me 45 minutes ago because he's been hired by a woman named Melissa, last name Holt, to watch a man named Brandon Cole. Brandon Cole is at LAX right now. He flew in from Phoenix this morning." The air in the car changed. "Why are you telling me this?" I said. "Because Derek sent me your photo," Marcus said. "The woman Brandon Cole has been tracking for 8 months. Derek wanted me to know, in case you were one of my fares." He glanced in the rearview mirror. "You're her." I looked at the back of his head, the soft Dodgers cap, the pale knuckles on the steering wheel. "Brandon is at LAX. Terminal 3. He's been there for 2 hours. He booked a ticket on the same flight you're on tonight. Derek thinks he found your flight information on your phone before the reset." My throat went dry. "Derek has already called LAPD," Marcus said. "They're sending units to the terminal. That's what I need to tell you. When we pull up, I'm going to lock the doors, and I need you to stay inside the car until the police have him contained. Because I don't know where in the terminal he is right now, and I don't want you walking out into that." We pulled up to Terminal 3 at LAX at exactly 11:47 p.m. The locks clicked. Thunk, 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 thunk. "Don't get out," Marcus said. "Trust me, you'll understand in a minute." He killed the headlights. I looked at his hands on the wheel, 10 and 2, knuckles pale, and I thought about all the times I had gripped a steering wheel exactly that hard, in parking garages and on freeways and outside apartments where I was about to hear things I couldn't unhear. I thought about how I had spent 25 years building walls, and the walls had not saved me. I thought about my mother at the kitchen table. I thought about Linda's voice shifting into problem-solving mode. I thought about Jennifer's braid coming loose on one side and the tight, guilty hug in the arrivals lane. 53 seconds. 3 LAPD cruisers came screaming around the terminal curve, lights blazing, and boxed us in on all 3 sides. Through the windshield, I saw 4 officers move quickly toward the terminal entrance. Through the glass doors, I could see the check-in area, the bright, terrible normalcy of an airport at night. Rolling luggage, coffee cups, overhead screens showing departures and arrivals. And then I saw Brandon. He was standing near the far end of the check-in area with his carry-on at his feet, his phone in his hand, looking at the screen with the expression of someone checking a tracking app that has suddenly gone dark. He looked up when the police came through the door. He looked directly toward the exit, toward the car, toward me, or where he thought I would be. And I saw his face go through 3 emotions in about 1 second. Surprise, calculation, and then something underneath both of those, something I hadn't seen before. Not guilt, something colder than guilt. 2 officers flanked him. He didn't run. He wasn't the kind of man who ran. He was the kind of man who smiled and made reasonable conversation and waited for the situation to organize itself in his favor. I watched him speak to the officers, watched him gesture calmly, watched the smooth machinery of his personality engage the way it always did. Marcus turned to look at me over his shoulder. "Derek is in there. He has documentation. The prior case number from Melissa, the technician's report from the Verizon store this afternoon, the building security footage from your parking garage." He paused. He's been building this file for 3 weeks. Melissa hired him the day Brandon's restraining order expired. She knew he'd do it again, I said. She knew, Marcus said. I watched through the windshield as one of the officers, not asking anymore, directing, had Brandon put his carry-on through the screening table. Watched another officer speaking into a radio. Watched Derek, a compact man in a dark jacket I didn't recognize, hand a folder to the senior officer on scene. The window of the cruiser parked to our left came down. The officer inside looked at Marcus. "She with you?" "She's the complainant," Marcus said. "Ashley Reeves. She filed the initial report from Phoenix this afternoon." The officer nodded. "We're going to need her to come in and give a statement." "I know," I said, from the back seat. "I know. Can I have 2 minutes first?" He looked at me for a moment, then nodded. Marcus turned back around. We sat in the dark car with the engines of the cruisers running around us and the airport glowing and roaring overhead, and I breathed. "Thank you," I said. "Derek did the work," Marcus said. "You locked the doors," I said. "You kept me in the car." He was quiet for a moment. "I have a daughter," he said, 28, lives in Inglewood. I'm always telling her, pay attention to what people know that they shouldn't. Pay attention to timing." He shook his head slowly. "Men like him bank on nobody putting it together." "Someone always puts it together," I said. "Takes too long," he said. "Always takes too long." Brandon was taken in for questioning that night. The Verizon technician's report, combined with Melissa's original police documentation and the building security footage showing him in my parking garage, not an unidentified heavy-set man, it turned out, but a man he'd sent, someone Derek identified as a low-level associate Brandon had used once before, was enough to hold him. 3 days later, he was charged with stalking, unlawful installation of tracking software, and violation of the terms of a prior restraining order that it turned out had an extended monitoring clause Melissa's attorney had quietly added before it expired. Cassie, when she found out, Jennifer told her, because Jennifer was done letting things sit, had her phone examined too. She found the same application. She had not known. She filed her own report. Whatever she had felt for Brandon, it evaporated quickly when she understood that the intimacy she'd experienced was partially constructed from information he had no right to have. I never spoke to Brandon again. Not once. His attorney sent my attorney. Yes, I got an attorney, a woman named Diana Solis, whose hourly rate made my credit score feel like a personality trait. A letter suggesting that I had mischaracterized the nature of the software, that it had been installed consensually as part of a mutual location-sharing agreement. Diana wrote back 4 paragraphs that I didn't fully understand, but that apparently communicated, in the language of legal correspondence, something equivalent to, "Try that again and see what happens." He pled out 11 months later. 2 years probation, mandatory counseling, a restraining order that named both me and Cassie, and, retroactively and symbolically, Melissa, who by that point had been contacted by Jennifer, and who had, on a Thursday afternoon in March, called me from Seattle and talked to me for an hour and 40 minutes about nothing and everything, about what the first year after looked like, about what the second year looked like, about how long it took before she stopped checking her phone for things that shouldn't be there. The worst part, Melissa told me, is that for a while I thought I'd imagined it. That's what he does. He makes you doubt what you know. "I know," I said. "But you didn't doubt it," she said. "You moved fast." "I had people," I said. "Jennifer, Linda, Marcus." "I didn't have people," she said quietly. "He made sure of that." I thought about my credit score, and my 401k, and my $14,200, and the 5-year Google Doc called The Blueprint, and all the walls I had built, and how none of them had protected me, and how what had actually protected me was a woman I'd never met who sent a photo from a dummy email account, a best friend who drove to my building without being asked, a sister who was scared of her own brother but picked up the phone anyway, and a taxi driver who locked the doors and said, "Trust me." The walls didn't save me. The people did. I still live in Glendale. Same apartment, same covered parking spot, same gym with the working equipment. Mrs. Kowalski left pierogi outside my door again this Christmas Eve, and this time I knocked on her door and thanked her in person. And she cried a little, and so did I. My savings account has $18,400 in it now. My credit score is 761. I updated the blueprint in January. Linda is getting married in April. I'm the maid of honor. I've already workshopped the speech. Jennifer and I text sometimes. She and her husband are good. The wedding happened, eventually. A smaller ceremony, 3 months after everything, with a guest list that did not include her brother. She sent me a photo from it, her laughing, head tipped back, under string lights on a patio. I looked at that photo for a long time. Then I saved it to my camera roll, put my phone face up on the table, and went to make coffee. The locks on my car doors still make that sound sometimes. Thunk, 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 when the weather changes and the mechanism sticks. Every time I hear it, I think about sitting in the dark outside Terminal 3 and Marcus's hands at 10 and 2 and the 60 seconds that changed everything. Pay attention to what people know that they shouldn't. Pay attention to timing. He was right. It takes too long. It always takes too long. But eventually, someone puts it together.